The forest feels different at night. The air grows heavy, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath. I remember walking through a clearing one evening, the moon just peeking through branches, pale and cold against the fog. My lantern flickered, its glow cutting only a small circle into the darkness. Every sound carried too far, each snap of a twig, each shift of leaves, echoing back like whispers. The ground was soft with pine needles, but beneath them, something heavier moved, like a slow dragging of claws across soil. I stopped, holding my breath, listening to the silence pressing around me. For a moment, I thought it was just the woods playing tricks. But then I noticed a shape, taller than a man, hunched, with her catching the moonlight as it stepped into the clearing. Its eyes glowed amber, its breath steamed in the cold, and when it turned its head toward me, I knew it wasn't supposed to exist. I should have left then. I should have run. But instead, I stayed. And that's when I saw it. The moon hung low, a thin crescent, barely enough to etch the dunes in silver. The sand beneath my boots shifted softly, like something breathing just below the surface. The wind whispered, cold, empty. I had walked for hours, or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. Time thinned in the desert. Every grain of sand seemed to hold a faint memory, and the silence between each step stretched too long. I paused. A shadow moved with me. Or maybe it was my own. Then I saw it. The forest had gone quiet. Leaves hung heavy with dew. Even the wind felt paused. My boots pressed into the damp earth. Every step made a soft rustle. Then nothing. The moon was pale, almost hollow, spilling light across a narrow trail. I thought I could see shapes shifting between the trees. But when I blinked, they were gone. I came to a clearing. Wide, open, and strange. The air didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just waited. I felt it first in my skin, a chill crawling along my arms, like something unseen brushing against me. Then my ears. A quiet hum, low and steady, as if the earth itself was watching. At the far edge, a figure waited. Tall, furred, its outline broken in the fog. I froze. Its eyes didn't blink, but they were there, glimmering, catching the moonlight. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run. But the ground beneath my feet felt too soft, as if it would swallow me whole. The clearing smelled of wet pine and something old, like stone left in the rain too long. I could feel the hum in my chest now, a vibration that matched my pulse. I told myself it was a deer or a bear, something natural, but the shape didn't shift. It didn't move. Just watched. I took a cautious step forward. Soft footsteps. They echoed too sharply in the stillness. I caught the movement of its fur, long, dark, almost dripping with shadow. The silence pressed harder. Every breath I drew sounded too loud. Leaves whispered under its gaze, though the wind was gone. Even my heartbeat seemed muted. I wanted to speak. My throat tightened. Only a small rasp escaped. It didn't answer. It didn't need to. I squinted through the moonlight. The edges of its form were jagged, like bark, like smoke, like something the forest had grown for itself. It shifted just slightly. A tilt of the head. A curiosity that mirrored my own. The fog curled around my ankles. Cold. Wet. I could smell moss and decay. And then, just for a heartbeat, I thought I heard breathing, slow, measured, and not my own. I wanted to leave, but my feet stayed rooted. The clearing hummed, static in the air, a pull I couldn't name. Then it moved, not toward me, not away, just adjusted, and the moonlight caught something in its eyes, something patient, endless, like it had been waiting for me since the first shadow fell. I turned slightly, glancing at the edge of the trees. There was nothing behind me, yet I felt the forest lean closer. Every twig, every leaf, watching with the figure at the edge. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stood and listened. The moon dipped behind a cloud. Shadows deepened. The furred shape faded into the darkness, but I could still feel it. Waiting, watching. I stepped out of the clearing. Softly, carefully, the hum lingered in my chest. And though the trees swallowed it up again, I knew the silence wouldn't leave me. Even now, long after I walked away, I can feel those eyes. Hidden, patient, always waiting under the moon. The fog sat heavy. a white blanket over the ground. I could barely see my hands. The trees leaned close. Branches brushed together, soft, wet. The air smelled of damp moss and old pine. I walked slowly. Every step sank into the earth. Soft, muffled, almost swallowed. Then I heard it, low, rolling, a growl drifting through the mist. I froze. The cold seeped through my jacket, but it wasn't just a chill. It was the way the fog moved around it, the way it swallowed sound. I stepped forward. The fog shifted like water. Shadows broke apart and merged again. One shape became many, circling, quiet. I could feel them before I could see them. A pressure in the chest, a static vibration in the air. Soft, wet breathing brushed my skin, though I was alone. Their eyes caught little flashes of pale light. Amber or gold. I thought I caught movement in the corner of my vision, but when I turned, the fog had already swallowed it. The growls rose, not loud but layered, under, over, beside me. I tried to count them. Impossible. 1 became 3. 3 became 7. Always just at the edge. I wanted to run, but my feet pressed too hard into wet earth. Soft rustling circled behind me. Leaves shifted. I could almost smell fur. Warm, damp, and animal. They didn't step closer. Or maybe they did. Impossible to tell. The fog was too thick. It draped over my shoulders, pushed against my ears. Every breath I drew felt watched. I tried to speak. Only a whisper left my throat. The growls paused. Or maybe the pause was only in me. I couldn't tell where I ended and where the fog began. One shadow came close enough to brush the trees. I could see its shape against the fog, lean, jagged. For catching drops of water, it tilted its head. Curious, patient, and then it melted back into the mist. They circled endlessly. Quiet, low hums of movement beneath the fog. I could feel the static again. A thrum beneath my feet, a shiver along my spine. I wanted light, a path, but the fog didn't part. The trees loomed like watchers. Every sound I made seemed too loud. Every rustle echoed, then disappeared. I moved slowly, carefully. The mist wrapped around me. Every inhale smelled wet earth, wet fur, and cold. The growls faded, or moved somewhere I couldn't reach. I kept walking, step by step, shadow by shadow. The pack was everywhere and nowhere, and even as I left the thickest fog behind, I could still feel them. Watching, circling, waiting in the silence. The forest thinned. Trees bent under the weight of winter fog. The ground was soft, soaked with fallen leaves. I saw it then. A cabin, small and crooked. It was dark and slick with age. The roof sagged, as if the building itself was breathing slow. I stepped closer. The air smelled of rot and wet pine. Every footfall pressed into soft moss. Leaves rustled, but no wind moved them. The door hung open. Hinges groaned softly. I paused at the threshold. Inside, the shadows clung to corners, spilling across the floor like ink. The room smelled older now, smoke long gone, but something charred lingered in the air, and something else, a metallic tang, iron, blood, or maybe rust. The walls were scarred, deep, jagged claw marks etched into the wood, wider than any hand, deeper than any blade. They ran in chaotic lines, across the floorboards, up the ceiling, as if whatever had been here was trying to escape or trap someone. I ran my hand along the wall. Rough, splintered. The grooves bit into my skin. A shiver ran up my arm, as though the cabin itself had exhaled. A whisper of movement, soft, too deliberate. The floor beneath me groaned. Something shifted in the shadows. A pause, then silence. I could feel the weight of the room. Thick, heavy, it pressed against my chest. The smell of damp wood and old earth clung to my clothes. I could almost hear breathing, shallow, patient, watching. I stepped further inside. The floorboards sagged beneath my feet. The claw marks deepened along the walls. Some stretched impossibly high, scratched near the beams, and in their paths. The wood looked darker, like it had soaked something in. The window was broken. Pale light spilled across the floor. Dust floated in the beams. It looked ordinary, but the shadows inside shifted differently. as if the darkness had its own rhythm. I wanted to leave. The cabin didn't close doors. It didn't shout. It didn't need to. It was enough that it waited, that it remembered. I traced the marks one last time. Cold splinters under my fingertips. Then I turned toward the doorway. Soft footsteps carried me out. The forest was quiet again, but the hum lingered. A soft, low pressure that followed me even after I put the cabin behind me. And sometimes in the dark, I can still see the marks, stretching across walls, bigger than hands, wider than reason. Waiting. The clearing was small tonight. The fog curled along the edges of the trees. The moon hung pale, thin, like a shard of bone. I could feel the air pressing in, soft and heavy. Every breath tasted of damp earth and pine needles. Then it came. A single howl, sharp and raw. It split the night, echoed once. Then again, from everywhere. I froze. The clearing felt tighter, like the trees had crept closer while I blinked. The fog thickened at my ankles, cold, wet, curling around boots and shins. I took a slow step. The ground hummed beneath me. Leaves rustled though there was no wind. My heart matched the pulse of night. Another howl, near, then far, and far again, but closer in another direction, impossible to track. Each echo overlapped the last, turning space into confusion. I could smell wet fur. Cold air clung to it. A metallic hint lingered, iron or maybe something older. Every hair on my arms lifted. The clearing shrank. Shadows stacked against the fog. I could see shapes move just at the edges, slender, crouched, patient. I blinked. They shifted, never leaving, never showing fully. My footsteps were soft, too soft. Even the snow-crusted leaves whispered beneath me. A hum vibrated through the ground, like something breathing just below the surface. The howls returned, layered, endless. 1, 2, 3. I couldn't count them. The sound came from trees, from fog, even from the space under my feet. I pressed my palms to my chest, felt my own heartbeat trying to compete with theirs. The cold bit deeper now, seeped into my lungs. And the echo didn't fade. I looked up at the tree line. Branches reached like claws. Shadows folded into shadows. Something moved, slow, deliberate, then vanished behind a trunk. I tried to move. My legs felt heavy, locked into the damp earth. The howls circled again, stretching the clearing smaller, tightening the fog around me. I whispered a name. It didn't answer. The fog only shifted, humming, pressing, waiting. The moon disappeared behind a cloud. Everything dimmed. The howls slowed, then paused. The clearing was still, but it wasn't empty. I breathed shallow, cold sweat clinging to my back. The fog curled, and I felt it, watching me, measured, patient. Then I stepped forward. The fog followed. The shadows stayed at the edges. And though the howls faded, their echo remained in my chest. I didn't look back. The trees leaned close. The ground hummed softly underfoot. Even as I left, I could still feel the echo, stretching the clearing smaller, shrinking the night around me, waiting for me to stop moving. The night had thickened. Fog lay low along the forest floor, soft and wet against my ankles. The air smelled of damp earth and something sharper, metallic, cold, almost alive. I walked slowly. Leaves pressed underfoot, crunching quietly, but the forest felt awake, waiting. Then I saw them, 2 points of gold light, gleaming like lanterns hung in the dark. They hovered just beyond the fog, unmoving, patient. I froze. The light reflected off the wet leaves. It touched the tips of my boots, and something in the shadows shifted. I raised my hand, holding a small lantern I carried. Its pale glow met the golden eyes. I lowered it, expecting them to vanish, but they didn't. The lantern dimmed in my hand, and still those eyes remained, unblinking, watching. My skin prickled, cold pressed against my neck. A hum vibrated beneath my feet, soft, steady almost. Breathing, I could smell pine, wet moss, and that faint tang of iron again. I stepped forward. The fog clung to my legs, wrapping around me like silk and steel. Every rustle felt amplified. Every shadow stretched a little further. The eyes blinked, almost, or Maybe it was the fog. Shapes flickered around them. Tall, lean, impossible to identify fully. I wanted to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Only a shallow rasp escaped. The eyes tilted slightly. Patient, curious, and entirely in control of the dark. I moved another step. The lantern shook in my hand. It cast long, trembling shadows. But the golden gaze didn't move. It followed, silent, unbroken. The forest felt smaller now, tighter. Every tree leaned closer. Every leaf whispered against the next. And those eyes, they held me in place. I tried to look away. The fog swirled around me, pressing into my clothes, into my hair. Soft whispers of movement brushed against my shoulders. And still, the eyes did not leave. A shiver ran up my spine. The lantern flickered. I could feel the static in the air, like something heavy resting just behind my ears. The forest breathed around me, and those eyes, they breathed with it. I backed away slowly, each step soft, deliberate. The fog shifted to cover my retreat. The forest hummed beneath me, dense, patient. And still, the golden light stayed, reflecting off the shadows, watching, waiting, even when I turned my back completely, even when I vanished into fog. I could feel them, everywhere and nowhere, eyes in the dark that never left. Dawn was pale. The fog had lifted just enough to see the grass, wet with dew, clinging to my boots. The tent was still, soft and empty. I had slept through the night, or thought I had. The air smelled of cold earth, of pine, and something heavier, almost metallic, lingering low. I stepped outside. The ground pressed into my soles, soft and wet. Every blade of grass seemed sharper in the morning light. Then I saw them, massive paw prints, circling the tent. Perfect, no breaks, no disturbance beyond the print itself. I knelt. The dew glistened on each print, deep, wide, larger than any bear I had ever seen. The earth beneath was compacted, heavy, solid. There was no sound, no rustle of leaves, no whisper of movement. Not even the fog seemed to shift, yet the prints had appeared as if the night had walked itself around me. I traced one with my fingertip. Cold, wet. The earth smelled sharper here, iron and wet pine. I could feel the weight of it in my chest, the scale of whatever had left them. I circled the tent slowly, every step careful. The prints repeated in a perfect ring. I stopped at the last one. It faced the trees like a silent sentinel. The forest hummed softly, leaves pressed together. Shadows stretched in the new light. I could see my breath, and I felt it. Something had been here. Everything had passed around me, and yet left nothing else behind. I wanted to follow the tracks, step into their rhythm. But the prints ended abruptly, vanishing into the grass. The earth was undisturbed beyond that ring. I stepped back. The tent seemed smaller now, the forest closer. Every leaf, every branch, bearing witness to silence. I breathed in slowly. The fog had faded, but a chill clung to my skin. The dew soaked through my socks, cold pressed into my knees. And still the paw prints remained, circling, perfect, eternal. I looked at them again. Heavy, precise, impossible, and yet undeniable. They waited, quiet and patient. Even as the sun climbed higher, warming the grass and washing the forest in light. I didn't move them. I didn't try to erase them. I only stepped away, softly, slowly, leaving the circle as it had formed. Even now, in memory, I can feel the weight of those prints and the silence that followed, humming beneath the dew, a quiet reminder that something had passed and had not left. The morning fog lingered longer than I expected. The forest floor was damp, cold, pressing into my boots. I followed the narrow trail back to the meadow. At first, it looked familiar. Soft grass, pale light. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. But then I noticed the trees. They had shifted, twisted in impossible angles, bending toward one another as if rearranged while I slept. The clearing felt smaller. The sky a narrower strip above. Shadows stretched differently, folding over the grass in strange patterns. I stepped forward. Leaves pressed underfoot, damp and trembling. The fog whispered across my skin. The hum in the air, soft and constant, seemed heavier here. Branches reached toward me. gnarled and curling. Some pressed so close I brushed against bark, rough, wet, and sharp. It smelled of decay, moss, and something older, a scent I couldn't name. I stopped. The grass under my feet didn't feel the same. The ground hummed slightly, tiny vibrations along my soles. I could hear the fog rustling through the twisted trees. Shapes flickered at the edges of vision. Shadows leaning, stretching, then collapsing back into the fog. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, the trees seemed to have moved again. I circled the meadow slowly. The patterns were impossible to track. Paths I remember were gone, swallowed by the soft, shifting fog. I could feel the clearing pressing closer, folding around me. A hum rose beneath the earth. Static in the air prickled along my arms. The forest smelled damp, metallic, a scent that clung to my clothes. And the shadows moved with it, stretching, bending, waiting. I tried to orient myself. Step by step, soft, careful, the meadow became stranger. Even familiar rocks appeared skewed, angled wrong. The clearing was alive, but not with wind or life I recognized. A shiver ran up my spine. My breath fog in the cold air. Something unseen brushed past my shoulder, soft, deliberate. I didn't turn. The trees leaned closer anyway. I knelt in the grass, ran my fingers over the damp blades. The frost melted under my touch, but the earth hummed as if acknowledging me. And then I noticed the shadows were not just shadows. They shifted independently, stretching into forms of fog should not allow. I rose slowly. Every instinct told me to leave, but I couldn't move quickly. The clearing had changed around me. Paths I knew had vanished, folded into twisted light and shadow. I whispered, but the fog absorbed my words. Nothing echoed, only the hum, the subtle vibration of the ground. The trees twisted a little more, and I could swear the space I had stepped in was no longer there. I took one last step back. The meadow pressed tighter, the shadows curling in slow arcs. Even as I moved away, I could feel it. The clearing had remembered me, and I was remembered. The fog thinned as I left. The air grew lighter, but the unease remained, a soft, lingering pressure that settled in my chest. Even now, I know the meadow is waiting, and if I return, it will not be the same. The forest was quiet. Damp leaves pressed underfoot. Mist curled low along the trunks. I ran. Soft steps, careful, deliberate. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Cold pressed into my lungs. Then I heard it, a movement behind me. Soft at first, like a branch bending under weight. Then louder, heavy steps echoing in the fog. I glanced back. Nothing. The mist swallowed the trees. Shadows hung thick and still. I ran faster. The steps behind me quickened too, then vanished. Silence returned, humming low in the air, but I could feel it, a presence patient, circling. Branches brushed my arms. Leaves clung to my skin. Every rustle echoed, yet no one was there. Every heartbeat felt amplified, each breath drawn heavy and sharp. I turned again. The fog shifted. Shadows moved in impossible ways. One moment the sound was close, then distant, then gone entirely. And still, I could feel it following, watching. The ground hummed softly beneath my feet. Static prickled along my arms. The forest smelled metallic now, cold iron beneath wet pine and soil. I slowed, every step deliberate. I could hear my own breathing stretching, swallowing the quiet. The fog curled tighter, wrapping the trees around me. Soft, deliberate footsteps echoed again. Just behind me, I turned. Nothing, then nothing again, and the hush of the forest pressed against my ears, thick and patient. I pressed my hands to my chest, felt the hum in my bones. Cold seeped under my jacket. Shadows stretched in slow, deliberate arcs. The presence hovered, never touching, never leaving. I ran again, slow, careful, every movement measured. Leaves whispered under my boots. Branches brushed against my cheeks. The fog followed, a living, patient thing. And then the footsteps stopped. The forest held its breath. Every leaf, every branch, every shadow suspended in stillness. I didn't move. I only listened. The hum beneath the ground faded, but the pressure remained. Something unseen had been chasing me. and it had not left. I stepped slowly forward. The fog thinned just enough to see. The forest stretched wide, but I could feel it, watching, waiting, hidden in the spaces between the trees. Even as I left, softly, carefully, the memory followed. The forest hummed beneath me, and the silent chase lingered long after my footsteps faded. Night had pressed in heavy. The forest was dark, damp, and still. Mist hung low, curling around the trees and over the soft earth. I lay in the tent, breath visible in the cold air. Every sound seemed amplified. A twig snapped somewhere far off. Leaves shifted, barely. Then I heard it, slow, deliberate, breathing, heavy, measured, close. I froze. It circled the tent. In and out, around me, pauses that felt calculated. Waiting. The canvas trembled under soft pressure. The air smelled of damp pine and something sharper, metallic, like iron or old rain. I didn't move. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs. I felt the vibration under my spine. Soft, insistent, like the forest itself was aware. The breathing shifted. Closer, then further away, then near again, skimming along the side of the tent. I pressed my hands against the thin fabric. Cold seeped through. I could feel the rhythm of it. Slow inhale, slow exhale, then pause, then repeat. My own breathing caught in my throat. Each intake sharp, shallow. The fog outside pressed against the canvas, folding over itself. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground. A rustle. Leaves brushed together. Branches tapped lightly. The breathing mirrored it. Slow, careful, deliberate. I imagined reaching outside, a hand through the cold air. But the pause in its rhythm kept me from moving. The air was thick, heavy, almost tangible. I pressed my face into my knees. The tent walls felt closer now, as if shrinking around me. The breathing remained patient, constant, a presence I couldn't see, but could feel in every inch of space. It circled one last time, then paused. Stillness followed. The fog shifted. The forest held its breath. I waited. I couldn't move. The cold pressed deeper. The hum of the earth and mist wrapped around me. Eventually it receded. The breathing faded. But the pressure did not. A lingering weight pressed against the canvas. And even as I drifted into uneasy sleep, I knew it was still there, patient and deliberate, watching, waiting. The moon hung low, pale and thin. Its light spilled over the meadow, washing the grass in silver. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Cold pressed against my skin. Every breath came slow, visible in the chill. I walked into the clearing. Soft footsteps pressed the wet grass. The fog clung to my ankles, curling like fingers around my boots. Then I saw it. A shadow stretched across the meadow. Tall, hunched. It moved slightly, but there was no body casting it. I stopped. The grass beneath shimmered in the moonlight. The shadow remained, solid, waiting. Its edges blurred in the mist, but the shape was unmistakable. The forest around me was silent. Even the leaves held still. The hum of the earth beneath my feet felt louder. The cold seeped deeper into my bones. I stepped closer. The shadow shifted as if breathing. A slow, deliberate motion. My heart thudded, matching a rhythm I couldn't see. I reached out. The air was heavy, damp. It pressed against my fingers. No shape met my hand. Only shadow, dense, cold, and patient. The trees leaned slightly closer. Branches curled toward the clearing. The fog swirled around the edges of the shadow, touching it, pulling it into the night. I backed away slowly. The shadow stayed, unmoving yet alive. The grass whispered beneath my feet. The wind carried nothing. Silence thickened in the air. I could smell wet pine and earth, and something older, metallic, lurking in the shadows. The moonlight shimmered across the shape, catching angles that should not exist. I crouched, soft, careful. The shadow stretched and hunched more, like it was settling into the night. And though I couldn't see its body, I could feel its presence in every inch of the clearing. I rose slowly. Every instinct told me to run. But the air pressed tight around me, and the shadow remained patient, waiting, eternal. I turned to leave. Soft footsteps carried me over the damp grass. The fog followed lightly at my heels. Even as I left the clearing, I could feel it. Watching, hunched, stretching longer in the pale moonlight and never fading. The clearing stretched wide beneath the pale light. Mist lingered low, hugging the uneven ground. The air smelled of wet soil, ash, and something sharper, metallic, heavy. I stepped carefully. Soft footsteps pressed into the grass. Every leaf trembled under the damp weight of night. The tents lay collapsed. Canvas ripped and clawed, open, edges frayed. Inside, the darkness seemed thicker than the surrounding fog. I could feel it pressing against my chest, cold and silent. The fire pit still glowed faintly. Ashes shimmered in dim orange, a heartbeat of warmth in the empty night. The scent of smoke lingered, woven with damp earth and a sharper tang I couldn't place. I knelt, ran my fingers over the wet, torn canvas. The fibers felt coarse and cold. Tiny scratches caught under my nails, as if something had brushed against the tents with immense force. A rustle, leaves shifted, a whisper of wind, or something else. The clearing hummed faintly, the earth vibrating softly beneath my feet. I rose slowly. Shadows folded into the corners of the collapsed tents. The fog pressed closer. Everything seemed to watch, patient, patient, patient. I circled the campsite. Ash glimmered in the pale light. Footprints, large, irregular, traced around the tents, deep and heavy, pressing the grass into the soil. No one had walked here, but the night had moved, and whatever had left them was gone. The air grew colder. Static prickled along my arms. Branches tapped above, soft and deliberate. The smell of wet pine deepened, and I could feel something in the clearing, lingering behind the collapsed fabric, watching the faint glow of the ashes. I crouched near the fire pit. Cold seeped into my knees. The clearing was silent, too silent. Even the fog seemed still, waiting. A shadow moved across the torn canvas. Slow, deliberate. I didn't breathe. The earth hummed low and constant beneath me. And then nothing, only the faint glow of the ashes. I rose, step by step, careful, deliberate. The tents loomed over me, twisted, ruined. The fog curled along the ground, pressing into my boots, my legs. I turned to leave. The clearing felt smaller, tighter. Every step echoed softly in the damp earth. The smell of ash and pine clung to me. The memory of the scratches on the canvas stayed with my fingertips. Even as I disappeared into the fog, the campsite remained, silent, watching. The faint glow of the ashes pulsing softly, like a heartbeat waiting, patient and eternal. The river murmured softly. Mist hung over the stones, curling into the dark mouth of the caves. I stepped inside. The air was colder here, damp and heavy, smelling of wet stone, moss, and something older, faintly metallic, like rusted iron. The walls pressed close. Every echo returned, stretched, distorted. I thought I heard movement, a low growl, distant, then fading into the stillness. Bones lay scattered across the floor. Small ones, large ones, broken and weathered. They crunched softly underfoot. Cold pressed into my hands as I traced one. It was smooth, brittle, impossible to ignore. The growls repeated. They echoed around me, though nothing moved. No shadow, no shape, just a vibration in the air. The hum of the river outside mingled with the unearthly resonance of the cave. I crouched, fingers brushing over more bones. The smell was sharper here, earth and decay, but layered with something that lingered in the throat, a scent I could not place. Soft footsteps followed my own. Or maybe it was the echo of my fear. The walls curved strangely, folding in angles the eye should not perceive. A shadow shifted across a rock face. Impossible. The light from outside barely reached here, yet the shadow moved independently. Cold pressed deeper into my chest. I stood, slow, careful. The bones glimmered faintly in the half-light, and the growls circled, patient, deliberate. I could feel it, something unseen, watching between the stone walls. I traced the cave further, each step careful, deliberate, leaves and dust shifting beneath boots. The echoes multiplied. Soft hums rose from the ground. The air thickened, damp and metallic. I stopped at a wider chamber. The bones formed no pattern, yet they seemed deliberate, placed by something unseen. The growls resonated here, low and persistent, and still nothing stirred. I pressed a hand to the wall. Cold stone, slick with damp. A shiver ran up my spine. The echo of the river outside pulsed in time with it. The shadows leaned close, stretching across the jagged floor. I breathed slowly, tracing the air with my fingers. The cave felt alive. Patient, 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 watching the small, fragile human who wandered through its darkness. I stepped back, softly, carefully, following the faint light back toward the entrance. The growls faded, leaving only the hum of the river and the whisper of stone. Outside, the fog pressed around my boots. The river murmured, and the scent of damp earth lingered. But the cave remained behind me, filled with bones, echoes, and silent presence. Even now, I can feel it, haunting the edges of memory, its low growl vibrating the chest, a quiet, patient reminder that something unseen waits beneath the stones. The river was dark and wide. Mist drifted low across its surface. The night smelled of wet stone, moss, and cold water. I crouched at the edge. Fingers brushed over smooth rocks, slick with river spray. The current whispered softly, folding over itself in endless murmurs. Then I saw them, 2 eyes, golden, gleaming beneath the surface. They reflected the pale light of the moon, tiny lanterns bobbing in the dark. I leaned closer. Water lapped against my hands. The eyes didn't blink. They shifted slightly, closer as ripples moved across the river. A shiver ran along my spine. The air felt heavier, damp against my skin. The river hummed faintly in time with my heartbeat. I could smell the riverbed, wet stones and hidden decay. I stayed still. The eyes followed me. Every ripple carried them closer, stretching across the water in impossible arcs. The reflection of the moon shivered in their gaze. I reached my hand toward the river. Cold pressed into my fingers. The surface shimmered, but the eyes remained patient, deliberate, not hostile, but watching. A branch scraped the bank. Leaves rustled in the fog. The eyes shifted again. Closer. The water whispered secrets I could not understand. I leaned back, breath caught in my throat. The river smelled of wet stone, moss, and something older, something patient and waiting beneath the surface. Soft ripples brushed my knees. The eyes glimmered in the dark. Closer still, following each subtle movement I made. I took a step back. The ground pressed cold beneath my boots. The mist clung to my legs. The river reflected the moon in fractured shards, but the eyes stayed patient, curious, unmoving yet moving. I turned to leave. The fog swirled in gentle spirals. The river hummed faintly. Even as I walked away, I could feel them beneath the surface, watching, shifting closer with every ripple, and waiting for the next moment I paused. The clearing lay quiet beneath the pale moon. Mist clung to grass, curling around the trunks of the trees. The air smelled of damp earth, pine, and something faintly metallic. I stepped forward. Soft footsteps pressed into the cold grass. The fog brushed against my legs. Every sound felt amplified. The rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind, the hum of earth beneath my boots. Then I saw it, a stag, lying still in the center of the clearing. Its chest rose and fell slowly, or maybe not at all. The antlers stretched into the night, twisted in impossible spirals, not broken by force, but by some unnatural design. I crouched. Cold seeped into my fingers as I brushed the dew from the grass. The air was thick here, heavy with silence. The stag's fur shimmered faintly in the moonlight, each hair standing soft and static in the damp air. The forest held its breath. Even the fog seemed to lean closer. Shadows pressed in at the edges of my vision. The hum of the earth thrummed low in my chest. I traced my gaze along the twisted antlers, curves curling into themselves, spiraling toward the sky. Not a crack, not a chip, only impossible, deliberate distortion. I could feel the weight of something unseen, watching from the trees, from the mist. The stag's eyes were open, dark, unblinking. I felt them pierce through the fog, and a shiver traced down my spine. The forest smelled sharper now, like wet pine and something older, older than the night itself. I stepped closer. The ground hummed faintly under my boots. Leaves whispered in the mist. The fog curled around the stag, pressing close, alive, patient. I crouched lower. Cold pressed into my knees. Every exhale came visible in the air. The twisted antlers seemed to pulse subtly, like they had been waiting, watching, curving in anticipation. I touched the dew-laden grass. The clearing was silent, yet full of tension. Every rustle, every distant branch tapping felt deliberate. A presence lingered in the fog, patient, unmoving, yet aware of me. I straightened slowly. The stag remained, silent. The antlers spiraled impossibly. The fog curled tighter around the edges. I turned to leave, step by careful step. The cold pressed along my back. The clearing seemed smaller, tighter. Even as I disappeared into the fog, I could feel it. The stag, its twisted antlers, and the patient, unseen watcher waiting beneath the mist. The pines pressed close. Fog hung low between the trunks. The air smelled of wet needles and cold earth. I moved slowly. Soft footsteps pressed into moss and fallen leaves. Every sound stretched long in the quiet. The hum of the forest was low, like it held its breath. Then I saw it, a dark figure crouched among the trees, its head tilted with every step I took. Slow, deliberate, watching, patient. I stopped. The fog curled around the base of the pines. The figure shifted just slightly, and I could feel its gaze pressing through the mist. The cold bit at my skin. The damp air pressed heavy in my lungs. I stepped forward. Branches scraped softly against my jacket. Needles fell underfoot, crushed into the earth. The figure mirrored me, tilting its head as if studying my every motion. The forest was silent, but the presence was loud. Every nerve hummed with awareness. I could smell the wet pine and soil, and something darker, older, lingering. I crouched slightly, careful, deliberate. The figure remained, its shadow folding into the fog. It didn't move toward me. It didn't retreat. It simply existed, patient, waiting. A breeze stirred. The mist twisted around the trunks. The figure's head tilted further, a slow, deliberate motion. I felt a pull, as if the forest itself leaned closer to watch. I rose, every step measured, careful. The cold pressed along my spine. The fog swirled around my legs. The figure remained crouched, tilting its head with each step, as though counting, marking, anticipating. I paused. Even the wind seemed still. The forest hummed faintly beneath the damp needles. The figure's gaze felt inescapable. I could not see its eyes clearly, but I felt them. I turned to leave. Soft footsteps carried me through the mist. The figure did not follow, but the tilt of its head remained in my memory, etched in the cold fog, a patient watch in the pines, waiting for the next step, for the next breath. The bridge stretched across the river, old and creaking. Fog clung to the water below, curling around the stone supports. The air smelled of wet wood and river moss, cold against my skin. I stepped onto the planks. They groaned beneath my weight. Soft, careful steps, but each one echoed longer than it should. Then I saw it. A single claw mark ran across the wood, deep, so deep it split the boards clean through. I crouched. Fingers traced a sharp groove. Cold pressed into my hands. The air felt thicker here, heavier, and a faint metallic scent lingered, tinged with something I could not place. The river hummed beneath the bridge. Mist swirled around my boots. Every shadow seemed to stretch, pressing closer along the edges of the boards. I leaned closer. The split in the wood gaped, impossible in its precision. No animal I knew could leave such a mark. No tool could do this. Only deliberate force, or something patient, deliberate, waiting. The fog pressed closer. I could hear the hum of the river, mixing with the quiet groan of the bridge. Soft scratches echoed faintly in the air, or maybe I imagined them. The wood beneath my knees felt alive somehow, sensitive to my presence. I stepped back slowly. The river's surface rippled faintly, though the wind was still. Shadows shifted at the edges of the fog. The claw mark seemed to pull my gaze, drawing attention, stretching into the dark, silent forest beyond. I pressed my palms to my legs. The bridge creaked again. The fog swirled thicker at the edges. The cold air pressed harder, and the smell of wet wood and something older lingered. I stood. Soft footsteps carried me carefully across the planks. The mark remained behind me, etched into the bridge, deep, undeniable, silent, patient, as though it had been waiting for someone to see it. I reached the far side. The fog lifted slightly. The river hummed softly beneath the bridge. The claw mark remained, and in the stillness, I could feel it watching, lingering, as though it remembered every step I had taken. The clearing was hidden beneath low-hanging pines. Fog settled across the ground, curling around roots and rocks. The air smelled of wet stone and cold moss, sharp against my skin. I stepped carefully. Soft footsteps pressed into the damp earth. Every movement carried longer than it should. The hum of the forest was quiet, but present, pressing faintly against my chest. Then I saw them, stones, arranged in a perfect circle. Smooth, gray, cold to touch. Each one standing like a sentinel, silent and patient. I crouched at the edge. Fingers brushed damp moss on the nearest stone. The fog twisted around my arms. The air felt heavier here, dense with stillness, as though holding back some secret. A faint drag echoed through the clearing. Claws, moving around the circle, never inside it. The rhythm was slow, deliberate. The sound carried across the mist, touching my ears and chest at once. I stayed still. The fog curled around the stones. The drag circled the circle again. Soft, deliberate. It was patient, careful. Observing boundaries I could not cross. The forest pressed closer. I could smell wet pine, moss, and something older, ancient. The stone seemed to pulse faintly in the pale light, casting shadows that shifted slowly with the fog. I leaned closer to the circle. The drag continued, precise, never entering the space between the stones. I could feel its presence, just beyond reach, patient, lingering. Cold seeped into my fingers as I traced the edge of the stone. The air felt alive, static under my skin. The drag circled again. Soft, deliberate, relentless. Every sound echoed in the fog, folding over itself and fading into silence. I straightened slowly, breath caught in the mist. The clearing was small and vast at once, folded around me, silent yet full. The circle remained perfect, unbroken, and the unseen presence traced its edge endlessly. I took a careful step back. The fog swirled around my legs. The drag continued, circling, never stopping, never entering. I left the clearing slowly. Every step pressed into the wet earth. The stone stayed, silent and patient, and the sound lingered behind me, a clawed whisper moving endlessly around the circle, waiting, watching, never crossing. The ground was damp. Leaves pressed against the dirt, slick with morning fog. The air smelled of wet soil and rotting pine needles. I knelt, brushing debris aside. Fingers touched something stiff, edges softened with mud. A journal, old, half-shredded. The pages were torn, jagged. Mud smeared the ink, streaking across words. I could see fragments, sentences ending abruptly. The weight of someone else's fear pressed cold in my hands. I turned a page carefully. The texture was rough, wet and brittle. Letters smeared beneath my fingertips. And then I saw it. The last line cut short mid-sentence. It's right behind. My breath caught. The forest seemed to fold closer around me. Fog drifted low, curling between roots. The silence pressed, waiting. I held the journal closer. The mud smell was sharp, almost metallic. Soft rustling drifted from the trees. Or maybe my own movement. Every sound became amplified. The pages trembled in my hand. Cold fingers of wind brushed my arms. The forest hummed faintly, like it had heard that unfinished sentence. The words hung in the air, unfinished, demanding attention. I looked up slowly. The mist moved differently here, shifting around trunks. Shadows pressed toward the clearing. The journal felt heavier, as if it weighed the forest down with it. A branch cracked somewhere to the left. Closer, closer still. The journal thudded against my chest. I couldn't read further. The end wasn't meant for me. I sank back slightly, keeping the journal close. The air smelled sharper now, colder, like the forest inhaled and held its breath. The fog rolled over my boots, and for a moment, I thought I felt a presence at the edge of the clearing. The unfinished words echoed in my mind. It's right behind. I could not bring myself to look. The forest waited silently. Soft footsteps might have brushed the moss, or it might have been the wind. I rose slowly, pressing the journal to my chest. The mud-streaked pages felt heavier with each step. Every rustle of leaves, every subtle shift of fog, reminded me of the sentence left unfinished. The clearing seemed to shrink. Shadows stretched. I left the journal where I found it, half buried, its pages smeared and silent, and yet the last line lingered, etched into the damp earth, hovering in the fog, like a warning I could not forget. The ridge stretched into fog. Wind cut across the rocks, sharp and cold. The air smelled of wet stone and ozone. I stood at the edge, boots pressed into slick dirt. Branches scraped softly against one another, and every rustle seemed louder than it should. My breath came shallow, caught in the mist. Then I saw it, a dark shape crouched against the skyline. Still, silent, the forest behind me seemed to hold its breath. Lightning split the sky. The shape flickered in the brief pale light, closer than it had been a moment before. Shadows stretched and twisted with the glow. I swallowed hard. The wind carried the scent of damp pine and cold stone, but beneath it, something older, heavier. The presence pressed against the ridge, watching, crouched, patient. I stepped back. Soft stone slid underfoot. The shape moved, or maybe the wind moved it. Every time lightning flared, it seemed nearer, closer, the distance between us shrinking with each flash. Fog rolled across the ridge, touching my arms, brushing my face. The dark shape vanished for a heartbeat, then reappeared, crouched, watching. The ridge felt narrower now. Every sound I made echoed, each breath mingling with the hum of the wind. I tried to steady myself. I wanted to look away, but my eyes kept finding it, looming, crouched, patient. Lightning flared again. The shape was impossibly closer. Closer than physics should allow. Closer than safety should allow. I could feel the shadow pressing into my mind. I turned, wanted to descend, but the fog was thick, clinging to my legs, slowing every movement. The shape crouched still, and the ridge seemed endless. Silence returned, thick as the fog, but my skin still felt its weight. The forest below whispered quietly, leaves rustling like faint breaths. The dark shape had not moved from my mind. I left the ridge slowly, hands brushing damp rocks, feet finding unstable paths. The air smelled of cold stone and ozone, and somewhere behind, the shadow waited. Fog clung to the ground. Every step pressed through damp leaves, cold against my boots. The air smelled of wet earth and pine resin. I walked forward. The clearing stretched before me, wide, pale under the muted light of the rising moon. Or had it been the same moon before? The trees leaned differently. Or maybe I was leaning. Branches scraped softly, rustling in a way that made my skin crawl. I took another step. The clearing didn't end. It folded on itself. The same rocks, the same pale grass. I remembered turning left, but I was here again. I remembered right, but the path returned. Silence wrapped around me, thick as fog. My breath felt too loud. A soft hum seemed to vibrate in the air, not from the forest, from inside me. I stepped again. Leaves crunched underfoot, but the pattern repeated. The same shadows, the same slight bend in the trees. I shivered. The wind moved differently here. It touched my neck, my arms, fingers of cold brushing through my hair. I tried to call out. My voice faltered, swallowed by the stillness. Every step I took, the clearing mirrored itself. The same stones, the same moss-covered roots. It was infinite, folding time back into itself. I stopped. Silence pressed closer. Even the fog seemed to lean in, soft and suffocating. I could feel my heartbeat echoing, loud against the subtle hum of the forest. I turned in a circle. The clearing didn't change. It was the same. Every direction I faced, the pale grass stretched endlessly. I tried to run. Soft footsteps followed, or maybe they weren't mine. Rustling pressed from all sides. The fog wrapped tighter around me, clinging to my skin, cold and damp. I fell to my knees. Hands pressed to the earth, the cold dirt seeping between my fingers. I wanted to stop. I wanted to scream. But the clearing didn't care. It stretched on, endless, silent yet alive, breath caught in my throat. The path forward was always here. And behind me, the path was the same. I rose again, each step heavier than the last. The fog and shadows pressed against me. The clearing refused to end. I was trapped, moving forward, never leaving, forever walking to the same pale, endless grass. The moon hung full, pale and swollen. Its light spilled across the clearing, cold against my skin, silver against the damp earth. Shadows stretched long. They moved before their owners did. A subtle twitch, a pause, then the body followed. I froze. The trees whispered in the wind. Every rustle, every faint snap made my chest tighten. The shadows circled. Slow, deliberate, like wolves stalking unseen prey. Their movements were almost human. But something in the sway, the way the darkness leaned, made my stomach tighten with unease. I stepped forward. My foot pressed into soft soil. The shadows shifted before me. I stopped. They stopped. The air smelled of wet pine and cold stone. A hum vibrated through the ground, low and distant. I could feel it in my chest, in the soles of my boots. I turned. The clearing had changed. The shadows multiplied, stretching in directions I hadn't moved toward. Each one coiled around another, closing in silently. I whispered my own name. It came out brittle, half lost in the hum of the night. The shadows flickered with each breath I drew. They waited. I moved again. A step, soft against moss. They shifted before me, their forms elongating, writhing, circling. The moonlight caught on their edges. Golden glints, fleeting like eyes. But when I blinked, they were gone. Or were they? I held my hands to my ears, tried to focus on my own breathing. But there was a rhythm to the clearing, a silent pulse, matching the shadow's motion. I stumbled. So did the darkness. The shapes warped, stretched, circling closer, closer. A faint rustle behind me, a soft step on leaves. But when I turned, nothing was there, only the shifting black, a tide of shapes moving beneath the moon. The cold bit at my face. My skin prickled. The shadows flickered with the wind, but they didn't waver. I wanted to run, but the clearing had no edges. Every direction led back here. The moon was high, silver light trapped in an endless loop. I whispered again. This time it was swallowed. The shadows leaned toward the sound, leaned toward me, hungry in their silent circle. I breathed slowly, held the hum in my chest, held the moonlight in my eyes. The shapes shifted, then froze. And in that moment, I felt the night breathe with me. The clearing, the shadows, the cold, all waiting, silent but alive, beneath the unblinking moon. The clearing lay quiet under a pale morning haze. Mist clung to the grass, wet and heavy. Each breath came slow, damp my lungs. The air shifted. A metallic tang hit my nose, thick, clinging, bitter, iron, cold and sharp. I froze. The fog seemed to pulse. Something moved just beyond my vision. Nothing visible, but the ground whispered beneath soft footsteps. I stepped forward. Crunch. Leaves pressed flat under invisible weight. Another step behind me. Then silence. The smell grew stronger, clinging to my clothes, my hair, my skin, warm and coppery, like blood on stone. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. The shadows and the trees swayed. A soft hum threaded through the mist. I could feel it in my chest, throbbing with each shallow breath. I turned slowly. Nothing, just fog and muted light. But the footsteps continued. Close, soft, taunting. The soil felt damp beneath my boots. Cold mud clung to my soles. The iron smell stung my nose as if it pressed against my throat. I took another step. The clearing seemed to shrink. The fog thickened. The footsteps multiplied. Yet no shape emerged. My hands brushed against wet leaves. A droplet of mist slid down my arm. The metallic smell deepened, more pungent, almost sweet in its intensity. I held my breath. The hum grew, soft at first, then rising, like the air itself vibrating. I shivered. A shadow flickered at the edge of my sight. Gone when I blinked. Another step. Crunch. Another behind me. The rhythm of something unseen, circling. I wanted to move. My legs refused. The smell thickened, pressing against my chest, filling my lungs with heaviness. The clearing was no longer empty. I could feel shapes, pressing against the fog, sliding just beyond recognition. Eyes that weren't eyes, breathing that wasn't mine. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. The hum lingered, low and heavy. The iron clung to me, to the mist, to the trees. I exhaled. The fog shifted, curling around invisible forms. I was alone, yet not. The smell remained, thick, metallic, unyielding. I stepped forward. The clearing seemed endless. The fog swallowed my footprints, and the footsteps behind me began again. I breathed. The cold air bit. The iron smell lingered, a promise that I was not yet free. The grass shimmered with dew under the pale morning light. Mist clung to the hollow of the valley, curling along the earth. Each breath came slow, damp, tasting of wet soil and cold air. I saw him first at the edge of the clearing. A man, still, his body slumped into grass. The wind was absent. Even the trees held their silence. Only the faint rustle of leaves whispered beneath my boots. I stepped closer. The ground was cold and sticky with frost. His shape twisted, imperceptibly at first. A bend at the elbow, a curve of the spine. I blinked. The sun glinted off something wet. A metallic sheen or sweat on skin. I couldn't tell. The twisting continued. Slow, silent. No sound escaped him. No cry. Only the hum of the air pressed against my ears. His fingers stretched, elongating unnaturally. Veins rose like branches, dark against pale skin. The grass seemed to wrap itself around him, holding him down, then recoiling as his form shifted. I could see it now, the subtle reshaping. His shoulders bent wider, his chest compressed. Muscles stretched and compressed in impossible ways. I wanted to look away. Couldn't. A low fog crept along the ground. It wound around his form, thick and damp. Each blade of grass seemed to quiver under the pressure of unseen weight. I smelled wet earth, iron, and something darker I could not name. The figure rose, sort of, but no longer human. Limbs angled wrong, head tilting, then snapping straight. A shadow cast across the clearing. The air was thick now, almost solid. My breath came in shallow gasps. I could feel the cold seep into my bones. The grass beneath me flattened under my fear. The transformation slowed. I could see his face stretch into something unrecognizable. Eyes elongating, dark and glossy. Mouth widening, teeth sharper in silhouette. The clearing had changed. The sunlight no longer reached him fully. Shadows coiled at the edges of his new form, lengthening as if drawn toward him. I wanted to scream. My throat caught. Only silence answered. Then stillness. The man was gone. Something else stood in his place. Tall, alien, and yet familiar in a way I could not place. I felt the hum of the world shift. Leaves quivered. Even the mist hesitated. A presence filled the clearing. Quiet but immense, like the night itself had settled into flesh. I stepped back. The ground was slick beneath my boots. The dew clung to my fingers as I touched the grass. Everything smelled damp, metallic, and alive. The figure remained, motionless, watching. The air around it shimmered, as if bending light, and sound in uneven waves. I blinked again, hoping, praying, that I had imagined it. But the shape was real. The grass pressed against its feet. The fog curled around its body. And in the quiet, I could hear something I had not before. The softest scrape, like claws dragging just beneath the surface of the earth. I breathed. The sun filtered weakly through the mist. The clearing seemed larger, and yet I felt smaller, lost in the space between what was and what had become. I took a step backward. Another. The figure did not move. Its presence lingered like shadow and breath. The transformation was complete, silent, perfect, and I was alone in the clearing with it. The moon hung pale, half hidden behind thin clouds. The clearing stretched wider than I remembered. Grass bent and twisted in patterns that shouldn't exist. I stepped forward. Each foot pressed into damp earth, smelling of decay and wet stone. The night was heavy, thick with silence. The grass moved again, not from wind, not from rain. Something pressed through it. Hundreds of small shifts, subtle but impossible to ignore. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, tall and thin, stretching unnaturally toward the center. I blinked, and they shifted, not following me, but watching, circling without bodies, without sound. The air felt solid, heavy. Every breath stuck, tasting of cold iron and wet leaves. I want to call out, but the sound caught in my throat. The clearing was alive. Grass bent and rose, then fell back as the earth itself shivered. I saw shapes on the pale moonlight, long, twisting, impossibly thin, the faint outlines of figures that didn't exist. I tried to step back. The earth resisted, soft and uneven under my feet. Each movement left a shiver along my spine. The shadows move again, faster this time, but still silent, still intangible. I crouched to touch the grass. It was cold, almost wet, but pressed like something breathing beneath it. I felt movement along my fingers, tiny, quivering pushes, like thousands of hands brushing against me from below. The moonlight caught a flicker. Shadows stretched higher, reaching toward the low clouds. I could feel them, not as shapes in the clearing, but as weight pressing in my chest. I forced myself to look around. No trees moved. No wind stirred. Just the grass, undulating endlessly, as if something immense passed through it and left only its echo. A soft hum filled my ears. Not musical, not natural. It came from the center of the clearing, low and vibrating, pushing against my ribs, against my thoughts. The shadows shifted again. Closer now. They didn't approach me. They didn't flee. They simply existed, pressing the space around me into narrower bounds. I tried to breathe. Air tasted of wet iron and something sweet and wrong beneath it. My feet stuck to the earth, my eyes tracing the endless flicker of darkness. I realized I was alone. No one else could be here. No creature, no human, no bird, no wind. Yet the clearing was full of pressure, full of movement, full of silent bodies I could not see. Time became meaningless. Each second stretched into the next. The grass rose and fell endlessly. Shadows danced without origin, and the clearing swallowed everything I knew of the world. I stepped back again, footsteps heavy and uneven. The ground gave slightly, then pressed again, resisting, shifting, bending. I wanted to run, but where could I go? The shadows, they followed without moving. The grass, it continued to press upward, pushing at my ankles, my legs, my body. The hum in my chest rose. I felt my heart in my throat, the pulse of unseen beings echoing through my bones. The clearing had no edges. It had no end, only shadows, endless and flickering, and the faint impression of bodies moving beneath the moonlight. I fell to my knees. The grass pressed higher. Shadows flickered faster. The night leaned closer. I closed my eyes. The earth hummed, and for a moment I could feel them all, hundreds of shapes pressing, breathing, watching, all around me. When I opened them, the clearing remained, endless, silent, except a faint, impossible rustle of moving grass. And I knew it would never end. The clearing waited. Moonlight fell in pale patches across the damp earth. The smell of smoke lingered, faint and bitter, clinging to the cold air. I stepped inside. Ash drifted over my boots, soft and gray, crunching quietly beneath each careful step. The trees leaned in closer, silent witnesses, their needles shivering in a wind that barely moved. The fire lay low, embers glowing like tired eyes. Heat lingered faintly, but the warmth couldn't reach me, only the hush of the forest, the soft static hum in my ears. I crouched beside the dying flames. Fingers brushed ash, smelling of charred wood and iron. The clearing felt hollow, as if the space had emptied itself of all life except me. A shiver ran through the trees. Something shifted just beyond the edge of vision. Not a sound, only movement. A shadow folding into shadow, and the cold brush of air against my neck. Then it came, a howl, low and deep, rolling through the forest like water over rocks. Not one voice, many, yet each note stretched endless, carrying a warning I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. The embers glowed brighter for a moment, as if the fire had remembered itself. Smoke curled in slow spirals. The howl rose again, rising over the trees, over the clearing, slipping into the soil beneath me. I pressed my hands to the earth, cold, solid, immovable. The howl bent and stretched around me. It was everywhere, yet nowhere. Shadows twisted along the edge of the clearing, long, thin, flickering. I could feel them, leaning toward me, circling, and I realized the forest was listening, too. The air tasted metallic now, thick with tension, each breath pulling the scent of wet soil and smoke deep into my lungs. The embers dimmed once more, leaving only blackness and the endless echo of the howl. I wanted to rise, to run, but the ground seemed to hold me in place. The sound pressed against me, deep and full, like the pulse of the earth itself, like the forest's own heartbeat. The howl changed then, no longer just warning, but something more, a final resignation, a sorrow that dripped into the shadows, pressing the night closer, folding the clearing inward. I knelt, shivering, every sense alert, every nerve trembling. The cold seeped into my bones, the silence between howls more frightening than the sound itself. The fire whispered its last breath. Embers faded to ash. Smoke rose, thin and curling, vanishing before it reached the trees. The howl lingered, a long, drawn note that stretched across the sky, rolling down ridges, slipping through hollows, settling into the soil, as if the forest had exhaled itself through that single sound. I leaned forward, head low. The clearing held me, silent and watchful, and the howl fell to nothing, leaving only the cold, the ash, and the echo of something eternal. I rose slowly, the fire gone, the clearing empty, yet alive with memory. The forest exhaled softly, and I knew there would be no other sound, no other moment like this. Only the quiet, the ash, and the final echo of that last howl.